Yeah, no, and with that, I guess I'll just introduce it and then pass it back over to you. So yeah, thank you guys for attending today, or if you're watching this, after the fact. So Brian is the guest today. Really, really unique perspective and background. Owned a HubSpot agency, so got to work in RevOps, sales, marketing, go-to-market, and operations, like across the board. And so his perspective today that he's going to share, I think, is incredibly unique, to just take a 30,000-foot level at like, what is RevOps? How should we be thinking about it? And things like that. And the benefit, I think, as an agency owner is getting to see it across so many different clients. So he's been able to kind of extract patterns and then share it today. So with that, Brian, I'll kind of let you introduce the topic and go from there. I might turn my video off so it's just you presenting on the webinar.
Yeah, and Luke, if you can, I appreciate the intro. If you can enable some screen sharing, then I will get that deck pulled up. We'll run through that as well.
Let's see here. Might need to make you the host.
Sure.
I think there you go.
Give me all the power. Let's do it. All right. Okay, so everybody, you should be able to see a cover screen here, and I'm very excited to have you here. And also, for those who are watching after the fact, are excited to talk about RevOps and what it is. Historically, we've had companies that have operated in silos, teams, especially as you start, you've in a small growth stage. You have a lot of people wearing different hats. But as your team and your company begins to scale, you start developing more mature functions of the business, and those mature functions forget to talk to each other. They start operating in their world, they get heads down. You're really, really focused on what you're trying to do to get your job done and be successful at it. And you start collecting tools, you start building processes, you start doing things your way, but you don't necessarily talk to the other parts of the business necessarily. And so what ends up happening, there's a lot of friction within organizations these days, especially across go-to-market functions like marketing and sales and customer service, where they're all operating heads down, trying to get their work done, do it the best that they can. But we're not really focused on that bigger picture. We're not making sure that we're removing those points of friction and finding ways for these teams to work better together instead of individually. So that's what RevOps aims to tackle. Revenue operations, or RevOps for short, is really focused on enabling your teams and your organization as a whole to work better, to drive greater revenue for the organization itself. So I'm excited to chat about this today. I certainly want to make sure that I leave any time for questions at the end. And then we'll throw our emails at the end so that if you have any questions, you can follow up with us after the fact. But for today, obviously, Luke got to introduce himself. He is an incredible leader and a founder and CEO at Serendipity. I would encourage you to check out him, his team, and his agency and what they're doing for their clients, as well as how they're impacting the world of RevOps and marketing in general, marketing and sales in general. I was fortunate to get to grow a HubSpot agency with a couple business owners, where I served as our main RevOps strategist. Although we weren't necessarily calling ourselves a RevOps shop, that's a majority of where we found traction with our clients and what our clients ultimately needed. And so I kind of fell into this world, but I get incredibly energized from it. So that being said, if we take a step back, let's think about how could we summarize RevOps into something that could be helpful and understood at a very high level. RevOps is a strategic approach. It's not in the weeds. It's up sitting, taking a higher level look at how we're aligning those marketing and sales and customer service functions. And I would also say, I didn't include this on the slide, but necessarily even on the admin front, thinking about how you're incorporating finance into that function as well, to ultimately drive revenue growth for your company, making sure that people are working better together, like I mentioned. Why do we really care about it, and what does it really impact? I think the important thing is that we're focused on making sure that teams are working cross-functionally, that you're really driving decisions based on better data and data that's structured in a more appropriate way. and you're focused on revenue. You're not necessarily focused on, generating that one lead. You're not focused on qualifying that one prospect. You're focused on ultimately the end goal of driving a revenue outcome from this. And so trying to get people to look a little bit higher level at how their particular role or their responsibility is contributing to an overall revenue outcome, making sure that's shared continuously throughout the entire organization. And from there, you're going to get some better operational efficiency. We're going to make sure that your experience from your customer standpoint is world-class and is better than what it would have been if they have to keep repeating themselves as they get transferred from person to person. And ultimately, we're going to help your business grow by increasing and improving the revenue performance. So where does it come from? Where did RevOps come from? We got this new term. Is it something brand new? Not necessarily. Right around early 2000s is when you really saw the general concepts. And I would say even before the turn of the century there, you had a lot of this happening, or at least a lot of the needs were arising towards the beginning of the 2000s here. The general concepts, though, are starting to take root in larger organizations early on in the 2000s. And you're starting to see, as teams are scaling, as technology is progressing in the early 2000s, especially on the business side and in the SaaS world, things are starting to now move to the cloud. You start to see a lot of tools that are coming into the workplace and coming into the business landscape that these teams are starting to use and starting to leverage. They're starting to build data in a particular spot. And you're starting to see some of these friction points arise. And so you're seeing that in the early 2010s of sales and marketing and customer service teams understanding that they need to find some better alignment, that this friction is starting to occur and it's starting to slow things down or make it more challenging for their leads and their customers. So you start to see around, as early as maybe 8-10 years ago, more defined RevOps roles starting to emerge, especially in that world of SaaS, right? And so any type of digital business might be already very familiar with this, but the general concepts can apply to almost any vertical, any business, whether you're a B2B or B2C organization. So it's really focusing on making sure that you can all work together and understanding that RevOps is something that can exist within your organization. From there, you start to see, even as recently as a couple of years ago, companies really starting to formalize RevOps teams, hiring specifically for RevOps roles. It's one of the fastest growing job titles and one of the fastest growing departments that organizations are adding as functions that they're adding to their business. And so we're really starting to see the traction of RevOps gain in popularity, and it's really starting to apply to more than just that digital first business. So one of the things people think about as we're adding RevOps to the organization is, where does it sit, right? Is it somebody, do I hire a RevOps person underneath my marketing leader? Is it just a sales function? Is this really something that, like, once a customer is paying us revenue, then are we committing somebody to focusing on expanding that revenue? And I would encourage you to think about positioning RevOps. If you're going to be adding dedicated RevOps resources to your organization, position that as its own standalone department. This is especially true for, say, mid-market or enterprise organizations, companies that are larger, that are looking to maybe add some RevOps resources to help that flywheel spin faster. Encourage you to think about it as something that exists as its own department and works collaboratively across all of these different functions. And so really, they're going to be focused on your marketing, sales, and customer service teams. How can we improve the performance of those teams and better align those teams together with the ultimate outcome of driving more revenue? I do think that you can also include the finance function as well in there, as when you're thinking about time to invoice or AR and collection. There's a way for RevOps to impact that function as well. But I would really encourage you to think of it as its own standalone department and not necessarily a sub function of one of these other departments that you have in your organization.
So I'll jump back in with a question there. Would you be speaking to, at what And it's kind of two questions, but what size of an organization, like how big should you be, maybe revenue wise and employee count, before you start thinking about RevOps? And then also, when you think about it, could you maybe speak to what should you be thinking about it more of, like, should we hire a outside RevOps agency, or like when do you bring it as an in-house standalone hire?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Luke. I appreciate it. I would say that there isn't necessarily specific hard numbers that you would put to say revenue figures or headcount necessarily. Certainly, you know, if you are a very early stage startup, you're a handful of people and you're trying to just define your product and find a product market fit, and you're trying to just get to market, then RevOps might not be the most appropriate thing for you to focus on right now. Let's focus on making sure that you can establish yourself as a product in the market or as a service in the market, and define clearly what you do. As you start to scale, companies that are moving into a growth stage or a scale stage, and they're really looking to move forward, they've got an established function, established product. They're ready to start driving those additional go-to-market functions. That's really where I think you're going to see some benefit to focusing on RevOps, or at least RevOps functions. If you're a small business, small to medium-sized business, it might not make sense for you to internalize those RevOps dedicated resources and build your own RevOps team initially in-house. So it would be prudent if you're a small or medium-sized business, especially as you're just getting started with RevOps, you maybe need to define your strategy, understand how you can apply RevOps to your business specifically. Maybe look at an outside agency, find somebody who can consult for you or provide that strategic guidance for you, implement some RevOps functions into your business itself. You know, as you continue to scale, you get into becoming, more of a mid-market business, maybe an enterprise organization. You know, that mid-market that you're coming out of your growth stage, starting to approach maturity and finding ways to drive greater scale in that sense. It might make more sense, instead of working with an outside agency, to then internalize some of those RevOps functions as its own dedicated department. That way you've got faster collaboration with your internal team members. You've got maybe some greater control over how you're implementing that RevOps strategy or adjusting it. It gets a little bit more tailored specifically to your mid-market or enterprise organization. So I would say a smaller, medium-sized business, an outside organization or outside agency might be a really great fit. As you continue to scale, you get to a point where maybe, you know, you're 50 plus, 100 plus headcount, and you're looking to really focus on continuing to expand your go-to-market and then becoming even more mid-market and moving up market there. Then internalizing those RevOps functions would be a prudent move. So we think about the core tenets of RevOps, and what are we really talking about here? RevOps, I think I would encourage you to think about RevOps as focused on three aspects of the business: the people that you have in your organization, the way in which they operate, so the processes that they follow, and the tools that they use or the platforms that they use to get their work done. So if you were to boil down the core tenets of RevOps, I would hope that you come away from this LinkedIn Live understanding that we're talking about people, process, and platform. Those are the most important pieces to think about. On the people front, we're actually talking about the people that are on your teams, in your organizations. Are they the right people? Are they in the right roles? Then how do they approach their work? And how does that influence the revenue outcome, when they're interacting with your customers and your leads? If you have someone that's on a commission model or some variable compensation plan, how are you structuring that plan? How are you properly incentivizing that person, not only to drive greater revenue influence, but then how are you also rewarding them when they do, encouraging them to stay longer, driving greater employee retention, and then making sure that those people have the mentality to know that they need to work together. They need to work cross-functionally, that they're focused on being able to meet regularly with other teams, regularly meet with your RevOps resource, and understand the shared goals that they have, the shared OKRs, or the making sure that they're incentivized in the same way. And just, again, facilitating that communication between teams is going to be really important, making sure you have the right people and the right mental space mentality to do so. But then when it comes to really how they do their work, that's going to be important from a RevOps perspective to document these processes, find ways that you can engineer them a little bit better, optimize what they're doing. Things such as lead management or routing, how sales is conducting their process and the pipeline that they've constructed, the way in which your team, once a customer signs, is then onboarded and serviced afterwards. How is your finance function invoicing that? What types of payment methods are you allowing, and how are you collecting your AR? Some of these points are just more granular examples of processes that RevOps resources would focus on. Again, with the goal of removing that friction, finding ways to introduce automation that might save repetitive or manual tasks, and making sure that you're focused on not only just acquiring new business, but how are you extracting more value from the customers that you currently have while providing them a better service. So I think that's a key function of really looking at processes, and then documenting and internalizing these processes so that as you onboard new talent to your team, then you are making sure that it's really easy to train these people on understanding how to go about doing what they are responsible for doing. We think about tools. So I would encourage you to think about platform, especially on the RevOps front. A lot of RevOps folks really focus on the tech stack. They really focus on the data, and that stuff is very important. But to me, platform is a supplemental thing. It's something that's a downstream tool that's used by the people doing the process. So when it does come to platform, though, you get several advantages of using key technology platforms in your tech stack. They're the ones that are managing systems, optimizing them. Of course, I have a lot of experience with HubSpot, but there's myriad tools out there that will be able to handle CRM tools, marketing automation and sales management, enrichment tools, service tools, payment methods, payment vendors, a lot of different things that'll allow a RevOps resource or a person to be able to tailor and customize it specifically for your business. You want to make sure that there's a unified data structure, unified data architecture for marketing, sales, and service. Get rid of the silos, break down the walls, make sure that everybody's working from the same set of data and that data is maintained appropriately, that it's clean, and that you have some type of hygiene plan in place, and centralize it, standardize it, and automate it as much as you possibly can to reduce any human error and make things a lot more reliable for the team that's actually using that data. It also helps when you're then building reporting and you can trust the reporting that you're building and the visuals that you're developing. You understand that that's truly reflective of the business itself and of the customers that you have. So
I have one more question about that. So, and yeah. I think I might know your answer, but I'll throw it out there like this, especially with your background being owning a HubSpot agency.
Yeah.
When should, because a lot of the brands that I know, they are either dealing with, marketing operations are in different silos, or they're tracking leads and spreadsheets and things like that. When do you suggest getting serious about HubSpot specifically? Like what pain points should you be saying, okay, we really need to start going that direction?
Yeah, I would say I think the common thread is, as soon as you understand that a lot of the time you're spending is on tasks that could be centralized in one place or could be automated. If you are bouncing from tool to tool, you're seeing different data in different platforms, or you're frustrated by the number of Excel sheets or Google Sheets that you have to dive through. You're not getting the response you want from the way in which you're currently doing it. It's a really good time to look at a platform like a HubSpot. Of course, biased to HubSpot, but there are a lot of other really great platforms out there, and marketplaces have continued to evolve to where integrations are becoming more off the shelf, which is great. But looking at something like HubSpot, is the budget component is a lot more accessible than most organizations believe. And so I would encourage you to think about it earlier than you think, setting a good foundation early on, will pay dividends down the line for you. Even in mid-market enterprise organizations, especially companies that are, say, like entrenched in Salesforce, there's a big misnomer that a platform, say like a HubSpot, is lacking features that that maybe like a more complex or sophisticated CRM might already have, and that's just not the case anymore. With the features that HubSpot has rolled out over the past several years, and then the variety of different solutions partners that are in their ecosystem, you can do anything in HubSpot that you could do in any other CRM. So, I think it's important to think about it earlier than you think, and the more that you are bouncing from spreadsheet to spreadsheet or trying to manage businesses in a spreadsheet, the more you could benefit from an actual system like a HubSpot. So, not to jump too far away from platform though, but I would say of these core tenets, process is going to be really important. I think the foundation of any successful RevOps strategy is understanding that process. People are going to come and go. It's the nature of the workplace itself. Tools obviously can come and go as well. But the more that you can internalize and document those processes, you can refine those processes and optimize them. The easier it's going to be for you to deal with the variables of people and platform. That being said, obviously processes are constantly evolving. It's not like a once you set it and forget it type thing. But this is really the core of, I think, how your business is going to operate. And then it makes training and onboarding new employees that much easier. It makes adjusting tools and configuring tools and platforms, it makes that a lot easier because you know what steps you're taking and what data you're collecting along the way. So it's much easier to configure tools as you say spin up a new one or refining the ones you're currently using. So this is a lot of text on a slide. I'm not going to go through it right now, but I want to make sure there's enough in the deck as we give it as a leave behind. But some of the skills and tools that you want to be focused on from a RevOps perspective, or as you are, say, evaluating adding a RevOps function to your business, evaluating an outside agency or an employee candidate, I would encourage you to think about these skills and some of the tools that I left in here as core competencies that you want to make sure that those people have as they are going to begin working through establishing your RevOps function or continuing to improve it. So these are just a couple of things that I think any RevOps professional is going to bring with them. And hopefully it can be serve as a nice checklist for you to evaluate how you are adding RevOps to your organization. So in summary, it's going to require some technical, analytical, and business skills, some business acumen. For revenue growth, you want to really think about that common thread as you are evaluating adding RevOps to your organization. I put a recap in here just to summarize everything for you as we go through, but I would encourage you to remember it's about getting people to work better together, impacting greater revenue growth for your organization, making sure that people, process, and platform are at the core components of what your RevOps function is focused on. And then making sure that they're able to work cross-functionally with a variety of different people in your organization. So I realize we're kind of at the end. I didn't leave a whole bunch of time for questions. But that being said, if there's any questions now, I'd be happy to answer them. You can also catch either Luke or myself on our email. Luke's email is here, and you can catch him on LinkedIn as well. I'd be happy to connect. My personal email is there as well. And you can find me on LinkedIn there. Both of these will be in the deck that we'll deliver to you afterwards too. So feel free to make use of them. This is certainly not the last time I'd like to answer questions. But
yeah, and I know we just have 30 seconds left, so we won't do any questions here. But I'll just say my major takeaway is it's really interesting as you're defining RevOps, RevOps is going to continue to be fleshed out and defined over the next 5-10 years, and it's a newer term, but it's really helpful for me to totally think of it separate. from sales ops and marketing ops. It's a separate thing. And then how can you like crawl, walk, run into it being its own separate thing? Because I think the thing today is a lot of people are lumping it into either the sales function or the marketing function, but separating it and then saying like, that's probably not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a process, and probably crawl, walk, running into that was just kind of a helpful takeaway for me today. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the common misnomers is people think RevOps is basically just sales operations or sales enablement, purely because they just think of revenue and equate it with the sales team. But it really is a holistic look at the different functions you have in your organization and how they're all impacting revenue at the end of the day. And so how can you help them work better together?
Totally. Yeah, and with that, I wanted to say thanks for everyone that attended, and have a great day. And I think, Brian, you're the host, so you can go ahead and end it.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, everyone. Take care. And if you have any follow-up questions, drop us an email or a LinkedIn message, and we'll get you straightened out. Thanks, everyone.